Jake had always been drawn to old houses where every stone seemed to hold secrets of the past. So when he moved into an apartment in one of these houses, he couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. However, within a few days, he began to notice that something was off. Nightmares became his constant companions, and his days were filled with an anxious anticipation of the unknown. On the second or third day, Jake realized that there were no neighbors in the building. He never met anyone on the stairs, in the corridors, or in the yard. This was strange, especially considering that the house was 9 stories high. The thought of living alone in this massive building plunged him into horror. Waking up in the middle of the night, Jake heard strange screams and eerie sounds coming from the apartment above him. At first, he attributed this to his nightmare-filled dreams or the anxious state caused by the mysterious aura of the house. But as the days passed, the sounds grew louder and more real. One day, Jake decided not to sleep all night to convince himself that these eerie sounds were just a product of his imagination. He sat in his room reading a book, trying not to fall asleep. There were no sounds. It was already around 3 a.m., and he calmed down, convinced that nothing was happening in the apartment above. He lay down in bed, but before he could fall asleep, he heard a loud sound reminiscent of the tolling of a large bell. He sat up with a start, clearly understanding that he was not dreaming, and what he was hearing was nothing but reality. He couldn't sleep anymore. Fear gripped him from head to toe. 10 minutes later, the horrific sounds resumed from the apartment above, accompanied by inhuman screams. Jake called the police, hoping they would help him figure out what was happening. Seeing a police car outside the house, he felt relieved. However, before a minute had passed, the patrol car sped away from the house. He was drenched in sweat. He tried calling the police again, but all he heard from the phone were dial tones. No one answered. Jake plunged into panic. He locked all the doors and windows and didn't leave his apartment for 2 days. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't rely on the police. All he had for defense was a kitchen knife. He understood one thing. What was happening in the apartment above was something paranormal. Jake wasn't going to spend the rest of his life trapped in his apartment. He began to look for a way out of this situation. He had nowhere to move, but living in this house with mysterious neighbors was impossible. He took the knife from the kitchen and, gathering his courage, left his apartment and went up the stairs. It was exactly the time when the eerie sounds were coming from the apartment above. He knocked on the door, gripping the knife tightly in his hand. No one came out. Jake decided to try the door handle and found that it wasn't locked. Opening the door, he saw a dark corridor dimly lit by a candle. On the wall, Jake noticed stains that looked like blood. It became even scarier. As he moved further down the corridor to a better lit area, he tried to listen or spot someone in the darkness. Suddenly, the candle in the corridor flickered out. Jake was drenched in sweat. Just as he changed his mind and wanted to leave, he heard ominous laughter. And in an instant, the lights in the apartment turned on. Jake was drenched in sweat again, and he rushed out of the apartment in horror. Rushing out of the house, he ran for a long time. It was night and it was dark, and the guy didn't know exactly where he was. Once he was sure he had escaped to a safe distance, he stopped to catch his breath. The figure in the hood was standing in front of him as if it had been there all along. He fell to the ground and started crawling backward. He screamed, calling for help, but the night seemed to swallow the entire city. There was no one around, no sound. He threw a stone in the direction of the hooded figure and without looking, ran away from him again. He saw a police car on the road. Jake began to call for help from the police, but just as he started approaching the patrol car, it sped away. Jake lost his last hope for rescue. He could only guess what this mysterious figure in the hood wanted to do to him. Jake had mentally resigned himself to death. Suddenly, a prayer his grandmother had taught him as a child began to echo in his mind. He closed his eyes and had nothing to hope for except the prayer that resonated in his thoughts. Hearing a loud crash in front of him and opening his eyes, he saw a huge truck knock the cultist off the road. He saw a black cloak lying on the road and the truck driving away into the distance. He couldn't understand for a long time what had happened and what it all meant. But Jake noticed that the sounds from the apartment above had stopped along with his nightmares. And over time, he began to meet neighbors in the house he had never seen before. This story remained a mystery for him,